Survivor Man challenge. Um, we've been going with this one, and we've been doing a couple things. Like one, when it comes to what crop we're using, we've been using just kind of a wheel to roll and randomize it. So we definitely have not been making the greatest strategic decisions on our crops, considering we started with sugarcane and then moved on to long grain rice, which is not a strategy I recommend. Sugarcane, it's very lucrative, but it is not fast. It's very laborious. Rice, on the other hand, is not very laborious, but it's not particularly lucrative. So we're kind of in between there. It's not bad, but it's definitely there could be better. But we did roll the next thing we were doing, which is canola. So where we left off, I've got my two places that are making sugar that we're selling for our main income. We've also got the rice that we're just selling as rice for the time being. But the plan is to build the oil mill so that we can start turning our rice into rice oil. And then once that's done, we will get ourselves a new plot of land set up to start growing canola, which we'll then make into canola oil. And then at that point, we would be ready to roll our next crop. So we are in June. Is June sell time for our sugar, if I remember? Is it June or July was sell time for our sugar? Let's see. So sugar, July is sell time for our sugar. Okay, so we do not sell our sugar today. We need to check the mushroom farm is fine. Those are all doing their stuff fine. Do we have any sales we want going on? No. Was there any processes I need to worry about for our long grain rice? Nothing for June. And our sugar cane, nothing for June. Okay, so it looks like we're just going into next month for that. Let's just double check our fields. Oh, you know what we needed to do? We need to flood our rice field. Yeah, so you're fine. We can go over here. Yeah, I should probably give people the tour. So basically, we started with absolutely nothing. And what we went ahead and did is we first added this greenhouse here. Inside our greenhouse, we got ourselves a bunch of mushrooms growing, anaki and oyster mushrooms. And then we moved on from there. We got sugarcane. This is only partially grown. That's the reason it's not towering over us. We then moved on to getting our sugar mills, where we bring all our sugarcane to make sugar. We got a bunch of our junk just piled up around here. And then up there on that big ridge over there, which is where we're heading right now, that big ridge is all flattened like that because it is a rice field, and it needs to be flattened because we do flood it. So it has like a little indentation when we get up here. If I let it just be a hill, the water would just go down the hill. Helping nothing. So supposedly with this field right now, we're looking... I keep forgetting that, like, for whatever... Oh, right. That's right. Half of the field, well, like a third of the field is on good soil, and like 2/3 of the field's on crap soil. So I'm not getting good yield out of it. Right, so you need to be flooded. Aw. Yeah, before you can. So we're gonna go ahead and just fast forward. We just gotta wait till the field to flood. And it took what was one in-game hour. Just one pump? Yeah, that's just... The way the rice fields work is they do only have one pump on it. And it looks like it takes about one in-game hour to flood a field. We just rushed it because that's all I have to do today is flood the field. But yeah, so with the Survivor Man challenge, to explain exactly what's going on, is we started this challenge with nothing but this fishing pole. And then with that one little fishing pole and $0 in a dream, we had to work ourselves up to actually having all this stuff. So we fished our hearts out until we could start getting our basic stuff up and running, which actually goes pretty fast because fishing is extremely lucrative in this game. It is very abusable. So we did that. And I like doing it that way, not because of the abusable nature of it, but because the fishing pole costs only 150 bucks, whereas any other way to make money ends up typically being around, you know, $100,000 or more. So the Survivor Man Zero to Hero feels a little disingenuous when you're giving yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment just to have the bare minimum. It's not $100,000 of equipment. It's $100,000 worth of land and then some equipment. But you end up giving yourself a lot more money than you realize. So the good news is we get to start with payday. I like starting with payday. So the only thing we got going on for the month of July, and I'll double check, actually, before we get to that, let's double check this rice field and see if I have to flood you again. I don't think we do. We do. Because like I said, that takes 1 in-game hour, which you can fast forward through and all that. So while we're hauling all our sugar, that's just over there running. So we can just drive over here. Now, when you look at all this stuff, like, the place where all my equipment is parked was already here, as was that little teeny shed over there, the little gas thing, and that little shed. But all the other buildings and roads and all that nearby my area, like including even that like dirt area off to the right there, these light posts, the buildings, the gravel path we're on, I did place and customize all that. Alright, come on. Because we can catch it while it's loading. It'll load up the whole truck. Now I gotta be careful. We've rolled many times here. But like even where these are worn tracks here that I've been taking the tractor along a little bit, those I all added just for aesthetics. They don't serve any purpose. So like this little road here, dirt road along the side, that's just something I added to make it look nice. Serves no functional purpose. Why isn't that loading area smart enough to take everything on the ground before it populates? Keep in mind, the teleporting it onto the back of the truck is a mod. That's not base material, like base functionality. The automated way of doing it base game is you can tell it to just sell it as it produces, so you never see the sugar to begin with, which is fine. You won't make nearly as much money because you do take a small cut is taken from you to automate it, which that's not too bad. But it will sell it whether or not it's in like its good season for selling or not, which can cost you like 30% of the potential profit. So the two of those together can be a pretty big cut to your pay. When you're playing on your own and you're not doing like sweaty stuff and all that stuff, honestly, it's just easy enough to be like, yeah, I just sold it. Yeah, normally you'd have to get a forklift, correct. But to give the idea, we would be looking at somewhere upwards of 300 pallets of those things I need to load up on here with a forklift. And if I'm going pretty hard on it, it might be something I could do like 4 at a time. So you get the idea. I would spend the entire rest of the stream just forklifting stuff onto this. So very much you'd be intended on setting it to automatically sell. Because usually at that point, you're not really worried about the money that much. But also, from the content creator side, people really like to see the money come in, and they like to see you sell stuff. Oh, yeah, if you're worried about that, it has a limited range, is why it's only putting so much on there. The mod, that is. So, the other side of that is outside the limited range. There's, I don't remember what the shortcut key is, but you can show the range, and you can actually increase it if you want to. So you can make it so it just hoovers up anything remotely close to it. It looked more realistic, so... Why doesn't the mod put everything on the ground of the trailer? Sorry for laughing. It would look more realistic if more of the stuff teleported on the bottom. There's just something about that makes me chuckle. It'd be like, you know, it'd look more realistic if while Sonic spun up into like a supersonic flying ball, if he had a little bounce at the beginning, or there's a little bit of a a delay, a little bit of a grippiness that came. It's like, I mean, you're not wrong, but also, inherently by the nature of it, I don't think we gotta worry too much about the realism. Is Gable stapler? Klaus? I'm missing half of that. But you get why they use the mouse? The mod? Yeah, no, it's definitely... So, like, realistically, in the times that I've run mod-free, the way I would be dealing with this is I would be going right here, going to you, and I would be changing output to sell. Because, oh my god. Oh my god, does the forklift get tiresome after a while. It can be fun for a little while, but there's definitely a point where, like, you know, I've spent the last 3 hours playing Farm Sim, and I've only driven a forklift. Like I said, it's also very much, it seems to me, and this is just kind of observation, that people seem to enjoy Farm Sim the absolute most, just watching things sell in the harvesting of the fields. Like, that seems to be the things that people most get drawn to. And then, to a lesser degree, the lumberjacking. There's a video about what you shouldn't do with a forklift. Ah. That's probably a long list. Gotcha. And it could even be at this point pretty soon that we could just set them to sell. Like I said, we'll still turn a profit by a large margin, but it will cut into our profit. Now, on the pro-con side of it, it does mean every month I get a little bit of money. So, like, there's just that steady income. I also didn't check yeah, the sales are junk here. But they also actually show this when you make the permission to use a forklift. I'm sorry. Oh, like, I'm sorry. I'm very confused by that sentence. Yeah, no, I get you mentioning the video. They actually show this when you make permission to forklift, to use the forklift. That's the part I'm getting caught up. It's like, okay, like, are you saying when you get your license, people watch the video, or like, you know, I'm very confused by the sentence, sorry. Yeah, no, I got what you meant, Jeff, that, like, even though it's doing something unrealistic, you could still make it look more reasonable, realistic while it's doing the unrealistic thing. Yeah, license, you're not good at English. Yeah, no, it's all good. Like, I know a lot of people, English isn't their native language, and even worse, the people who English is their native language who, you know, we just can't talk it. It's just not how it works. Especially can't type it. But yeah, there's definitely, I could see that, like, it's a normal thing, being like, hey, you know, here's an example of just the curse stuff going on you can do. Well, I'm glad we're on the same page. Yeah, no, absolutely. 100%, it's just kind of one of those things. Just Skyrim Ragdoll. I remember when Ragdoll mechanics were first introduced to, like, any mainstream games. Was that Unreal? Was that Unreal Tournament? That they started, like, properly doing ragdolls. Like, it wasn't the very first one that had ragdolls, but, like, they kind of took, like, the tech to a next level. And I distinctly remember they had a map where there's just a pit in the middle with a bunch of bars going across it. And it's just definitely one of those things that you just wanted to see how it works, so you just kept hucking yourself into this pit to watch the bodies, like, bounce and ricochet off of things. you know, and get snagged up and whatever, because that was, you know, new fandangled tech at the time. Yeah, you're all good. Yep. You know, get this all loaded up. And I'm partially tempted to actually switch the sugar over to immediate sell. Like, again, it is kind of a bummer because it is something that people just kind of enjoy watching the sell things. But I am thinking, like, literally here in a minute, I'm going to be buying the oil mill. We have the money for it right now. I'm just waiting till harvest because a building sitting there with nothing in it, charging me rent, isn't doing me a whole lot of good, or maintenance, whatever they call it. Basically, the costs are keeping the building functional. It's not much money, but at the same time, you know, probably don't run it if you don't need to. And then the plan for where we're putting the canola, or the oil mill, is right along the front of the rice area there. I'm going to put enough room behind it to effectively have a dirt road, because the area behind it's where you drop off the, farm sim is good background noise? Absolutely. I mean, that was definitely a thing. I was actually surprised that the vote wasn't closer to even. That there was, like, no vote. I mean, there was, like, a couple of votes for News Tower, but everything else is farm sim. Which makes sense. Kerbal Space Program would fall under the simulation genre, even though it is a very different animal than farm sim. And at the same time, I do feel like when it comes to News Tower, that's also again, it takes a little bit to get up and running. Let's see, so you use mods of this game, but not Kerbal Space Program. I never felt the need for mods for Kerbal Space Program. That's pretty much it. For me, if we actually look at the mods I'm running, so most of the mods I'm running are Giant Software, the developers of the game's official mods. And basically that's equipment from past versions of the game that didn't get included in the base game, so they're not something you pay for. It's just they don't want to make the install file on this ridiculous. So they do, after the game gets released, add mods to give you any stuff that was missing. Otherwise, the map we are on is a mod. Because for this type of challenge, you end up needing a mod to have a map that's not like already got a city on it, a bunch of fields. And then I am running another official mod called Precision Farming, which in my opinion is just the way the game comes, but it is the more involved work. But again, that is a Giant Software official mod. Honestly, in most other games, it would just be a alternate setting, but for whatever reason, they've made it a mod, and that's fine. But the only mod I'm running is this thing loading up here, where it's like autofilling. That's the only like proper mod I'm running that isn't just. Well, I mean, I guess the map as well. So it'd be the map and then the autofill are the only actual true mods. The rest is all, like, official stuff that most games would be, like, just included settings that Giants, because, again, install size, they want to keep it manageable, they make into mods. So we are still running pretty dang close to vanilla. Whereas 90% of the mods I hear people bringing up with Kerbal are either, one, graphics mods, and broadly speaking, I'm the kind of person to be like, I want to turn down the graphics to get the better frame rate and make sure it runs fine. I'm not too fussed about, like, you know, everything being as you know, graphic high fidelity as possible. Alright, Luxray, you take it easy. Thank you again for tuning in. So, Kerbal Space Program, it runs fine, but you could definitely get it to be pretty angry with you at times, especially as you start getting really big rockets and stations. So making it a little bit prettier has never been something I've been too worried about. And it also looks pretty good, like, out of the box. If you look into the About section, I do actually have all of my hardware specs listed there. It was a very high-end computer. I would still say it's on the relatively high-end, but, you know, like a generation or two behind now. But it's still a very strong computer. I also don't feel like I need to turn my room into, like, a sauna because of how hot it gets just trying to, you know, get that, get that extra set of graphics. Man, OKSB, it's partially... So, to keep in mind, one of the big reasons I don't tend to mod very heavily is I don't want to go through the effort of having to go and, you know, find the mods, do the research on which are the good mods, you know, does it have performance stability or balance implications? If it does, how do we mitigate those? You know, then you get mods that don't play nice together, but it's hard to not document. Then you have a problem with the mod, and where do you go to support for that? Maybe the mod page has someone actually maintaining it, maybe it doesn't. Like, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of, like, the really big thing I don't enjoy when it comes to dealing with mods. It's really easy to get yourself into the point you're spending all your limited play time, you know, dealing with mods as opposed to actually playing the game. A few questions about your hardware, if you could? Sure. I'll answer them off the top of my head if I can. I am tech savvy, but it's also those things that I don't memorize my kit and all that, so if you're like, oh, why did you get this version of your video card versus that version? I don't know. I did my research at the time and then promptly forgot after I bought it. Because I only have to do my research on hardware like every 5 years or so. When, you know, something starts to fail in my computer, and it's like, okay, is this something you fix it, or is it something that it's, you know, one of those core things, motherboard, processor, power supply, you know, these things that when one of them goes, you kind of just, well, motherboard, processor, RAM. When one of them go, well, I mean, it's really motherboard or processor. When one of those goes, you're better off just rebuilding, not just swapping the part, because by then it'll cost you half as much to fix it as it will to get you, you know, set up on a new one. And the last of the sugar. Could you take the 2 gig storage to make it act like a 4 gig kit? Act as one 4 gig kit? So hard drives, it's not 2 gig, we'll say like 2 terabyte. Yeah, you can, so when you're dealing with hard drives, I'm assuming you're talking about the hard drives. So with your hard drives, you can run those as independent hard drives, and each one would be 2 gigs. You can also run them what's known as RAID 0. RAID 0 basically means they kind of act as one big setup. Or was that RAID 0 or was that RAID 1? And I think it was then RAID 1 is where they're effectively mirrored. And then you can, you know, then there's other stuff you can go in there. So you can do all that stuff. But yeah, if you're talking hard drives, you can... you can... Yeah, RAID 0 is where you just kind of, you know, make them work as one hard drive. I had to think about that. But yeah, you can make it so that it just acts as one giant hard drive. There are implications for doing that, though, that I actually don't recommend, you know, running them like a spanned hard drive. I would much, much higher recommend you instead either run them as separate hard drives, or you run them as, like, mirrored or stuff like that. And that gets all up into, like, backup strategies and all that kind of stuff. So it is a very complicated thing in going in there. It's not a complicated thing to set up. Like, literally, most of your stuff, you just go into your motherboard and be like, I want this to be in whatever format, and you just have to do it when you start. You can't do it later. Yeah, Windows can also just do just a bunch of disks. Yeah. So that was the other thing I was going to say, is you can just go into Windows, and you'd have your hard drives, and you'd make it into a virtual hard drive of the other hard drives that can just be what's known as a spanned drive, which is a different animal. There's ways to accomplish what you just asked. And there's pros and cons with that. The one through Windows isn't as problematic if you have a hard drive problem, but that's generally the thing to be careful about with span drives. Is one of the hard drives fail, it can cause you a lot of grief. Whereas if they're separate hard drives, only the one that fails is a problem. What about doing that with spinning disks and newer NVMEs? So if you do a span drive between different speed hard drives, it comes down to what files are being accessed. If that file being accessed is stored on the slower drive, it'll run slower. If it's on the faster drive, it'll run faster. If it's spanned between the drives, it'll run slower. And then it also matters, like, where did you put the partition information? Is it on the faster or the slower hard drive? The mix and matching can get kind of be a mess. Right, you can also have your hard drive, as Burning Sun's mentioning, and this is something that I've been going back to mount this thing. So it can be done, but it doesn't sound like it's recommended. No, I generally would keep your hard drive separate. If you are going to combine them, doing something like what Burning Sun just mentioned and make one a folder inside the other hard drive isn't a terrible solution. That actually can work relatively well. So that's worth considering. But as far as like using disk partitions and like merging your hard drives and all that when they're different things, that's something I wouldn't recommend. Now, using stuff like RAID 1 and all that for backup and all that can be really good. If you want to combine hard drives, what I actually do kind of recommend is you wouldn't do it with 2. I think you need a minimum of 3 hard drives. But you get into stuff like, you know, RAID 2, RAID 3, RAID 5, all that kind of stuff. And it comes down to basically what you do is you'd have like 3 hard drives, and you share the storage behind them, but they also act as partial backups for each other. And then the idea with that is any one of the hard drives can fail, and you can rebuild from that. If 2 hard drive fails, you're crap out of luck. You're gonna lose something. I haven't done that in ages though. But even then, if you're gonna run RAID across multiple hard drives, you usually want them to be at least the same size. You can sometimes get away with running that stuff with different sizes, but usually it's going to limit you down to whatever the smallest is. Let's see, most motherboards support RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 10, but you need separate expensive RAID card for RAID 5 and 6. All depends on your goals. Yeah. Isn't it impossible for new... Let's see, isn't it impossible for the new... Oh no, nothing... Literally nothing in existence cannot fail. Everything that exists will fail sooner or later. The lifespan on your solid-state type drives, such as NVMe, you know, is longer than your traditional spindle drive, but they will eventually fail. Everything fails. Like, and that's not just you, like, you banged on something, whatever, fail. Everything fails sooner or later. It used to be a thing that, like, in woodshop, my woodshop teacher used to be like, you know, we'd have a bunch of kids who had nothing better to do because they'd be waiting for a machine, so take the tape measure and then you'd just pull it out and let it recoil back in. It used to be like, you know, every single time you do that, it's one less time it's going to do that. Which, okay, on the theoretical side, that is true, that at some point it's going to break, you know, X number of uses. But it's not actually like a hard limit that you hit like 10 uses and then it just like spontaneously snaps. Okay, so long grain rice is tomorrow. Sugar cane is in 2 days. In fact, cheap SSDs will fail more often than spindle drives. Yes, you can run into that. And they fail differently depending on how they're built. You'll have some of those they'll read and then they won't. And then some of them they'll start shutting down parts of the drive as they fail and they'll start giving you warnings. All depends on the nature of the drive, how it particularly fails. But yeah, no, everything fails. Sooner or later, everything fails, everything breaks. But yeah, no, a quality SSD should way outlast a quality spindle drive. And then the cheap drives, good luck. Right. Let's check I shouldn't need to fill this up today. Yeah, so it doesn't want me to fill it up today. Okay. So tomorrow is grain day as well as the oil mill day. And this time we're going to try and remember to position it so our worker starts harvesting so that the grain or the rice would be dropped out to the outside. Okay, so on your RAM specs, why do you have so much? Well, you got a couple of things. One, I do software development, and a lot of times that can be very, very greedy. If you imagine like your most RAM costly thing I might write in software, I need more RAM than it costs to run that thing. The other thing is I play a lot of games all over the place while streaming. Both of those eat up a lot of RAM. And RAM back then was cheap. So, you know, it was cheap to overspec the cheap thing. Because like RAMs and hard drives were dirt cheap at the time, and then graphics cards were stupid expensive at the time. CPU was kind of neither here nor there. It wasn't cheap, it wasn't expensive, it was kind of in the middle of the pack. You can't believe the cost of RAM today? Yep. Thank you, generative AI. But not thank you. Thanks, AI. I love the slow melting of the planet and the copious costs of everything that you have generated. What more could I ask for in life? Honestly, quite a few things. Okay, so while that... Don't you dare go to the right. You line that up, and you go left. Thank you. So what we're going to do is, while you begin harvesting, we're going to go to construction, because now it's time for factories, and what we're looking for is the oil factory. Oil mill. So the plan for the oil mill is to go over here and place it around here, so that there's enough room we can get behind it and in front of it. You overlap another object. Is it because the harvester's too close? I think literally it's because the harvester's too close. There's probably some way you can like really bug out the AI, and that's what the prevention is. So we just gotta wait for it to get out of the way. Okay, so I think... Trying to just get an angle where I know it's... Doesn't need to be perfect, but I want it to at least be somewhat square. Yep, so we should be able to access the back, which is where we drop the crops in. And we should be able to access the front, which is where we get the oil out. Okay, and now we got that planted. We grab our smooth tool. And we just want to get to as nice as possible. It doesn't need to be perfect, but just so we're hopefully not like ramping up the side every time we get in here. Okay, and later on I'll make like a little area where you can drive through there. So yeah, so the point is we get enough room that we can drive behind it and all that. So you're filling up. Okay, so for your case, you can see why you have so much. Recommendations for the average user. What is a good speed? Yeah, that's, yeah, Burning Sun's exactly on the case. So very genuinely, I used to teach computer repair, advanced computer, PC repair, advanced PC repair, and A+ certification. And, I used to have an entire class that it was an exercise to get my students to take theory into actual work, where I would give them each assigned a computer. Like, you know, basically a customer was like, I want a computer that does this, and a budget, and that they would have to go online and figure out, like, what, you know, basically price it all out, get it all sorted out, and do all that. And I usually had, like, one who had just, like, an email machine that, like, you were taking whatever would run. Like, you had no budget. And then you had, like, a gaming PC. You had one that was, like... you troll, you had to stop right there. We can make this work. If it would have gone just around that corner, I could have gone, like, right next to it. I might still be able to make this work. I'm just gonna have to ride up on the edge a little bit here. Yeah, now the question is, with gaming, what kind of games? Because if you're playing games like Stardew Valley and Terraria, you don't need a whole lot of hardware to throw at it. Yeah, my usual go-to for building out my gaming computer is what's the current thing? Go 1 to 2 generations back. But yeah, no, it definitely depends on your game. Because if you're playing like Dwarf Fortress, Terraria, RimWorld, these kind of things, pretty mild requirements. If you're into like lots and lots of like tycoon games, you're probably not going to need a lot of GPU, which will save you a ton of money. You'll need just something pretty mild, but you probably will want to spend a little extra on your CPU. At the same token, if you're breaking out Call of Duty, you might want to back off on the CPU, could save some money there, but you're definitely going to want to spend your money on that GPU. And you get the idea. So it's unfortunately a complicated thing. Same games like you're running, Kerbal, Sims, Halo. So I can't speak for the new Halo, because I haven't looked at the specs at all for the new Halo. So Kerbal actually has pretty low system requirements. RAM and CPU can help there, but like GPU's not a big deal for Kerbal. Like you can go very, very sparing on the GPU for Kerbal. It's not a very GPU intensive game. Halo I can't answer. Sims I believe is pretty low requirements on GPU. I would guess it would need a decent amount of CPU. Like you probably don't need to be running like the latest tech, but it's probably one of those things that like the more you add to it, the more you're gonna need on the CPU end. Alright, so that gives me enough stuff to turn on our oil mill. So with that, we want to make long ice, whatever. So we're gonna change you to storing it and activate. So you can store 120,000 liters of rice. Well, you wouldn't mind using BlackRock's volumetric clouds for Kerbal Space Program? Smallest volumetric things in game? Yeah, basically the more you're going to be adding to it, you're adding to your requirements. And it's definitely always one of those things that when you are building out a computer, you go to like, here is what I need, and then you definitely want to bump it up more than that. How much you bump it up more than that, that is a whole science. But you definitely want a cushion because you're going to have new games come out, and if you aim low, there's no real way to go up. Yeah, the Sims you could definitely run it without pushing too hard on the hardware. Now if you're talking not Sims like these Sims, but Sims like this, that gets to be a very complicated question as well, because there's some of these Sim games that are very well optimized and really don't take much to run. And then there are other Sims games, like Sim games, that are very not well optimized. A lot of your Sim games, if they're this style, are going to be a little bit heavier on the GPU, your graphics card. But there are some that are CPU heavy. We have a chance to buy a used PC, hence all the stupid questions. Yeah, no, that's no problem. And they're not stupid questions. This is the way everyone learns to do computer stuff. Is they go, I want to know more, and they start asking lots of questions. And also, especially with like graphics cards, I still hate the graphics cards like versioning, where it's like the first number is what generation it is, the second number is like what tier it is, and the third number, well, I mean, actually, the second number can also be what generation it is, but like, you know, you get the next one, and that's like what tier it is, and it's just one of those things where like, man, could you just say like version 1, 2, 3, 4? And then give them a you know, base, pro, ultra, whatever. TI Pro X Super. Yep. I'd rather that than, like, this number they're like, well, is the third or fourth digit important? Well, actually, so the first digit's a generation. But, you know, that doesn't mean buying the bigger number is better. Because if I, for example, bought a 1050, the 980 is probably going to outperform it. And people just stare at you and you're like, what? You're like, look, man, it makes sense if you understand. It comes with a 3090 RTX, like you have. Oh yeah, no, a 3090 is solid. Yeah, 39 solid. Like, the only games that aren't gonna run like butter is you might have like brand new games you're not gonna be running on Ultra or whatever, but the 3090 is gonna run just about anything at least well enough. And then, like, anything that isn't brand new, it's probably gonna run on Ultra. And even a lot of the new stuff, it'll still run pretty close to max settings. So yeah, you're good. Like I said, most of the time I usually buy something 1 or 2 generations behind to get the best bang for your buck. The only reason I got this one when it was new is there was a shortage on video cards, and my video card was, like, actively failing. Like, it was blue screening, and it's like, alright, you know, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and my computer is my livelihood, so it was a time that if you wanted a video card, you called, like, the local place and be like, hey, when are you getting your next shipment? Okay. And you, like, signed up to notifications from, like, different Discords. It was a rough time. So I was not, like, I really didn't want to pay the money I did, because I was actually going to get the 3080 was the plan, but the 3090 was the only one that came up, and I managed to snag one at about MSRP, which is, like, market price. You know, at the time, getting stuff MSRP was pretty good. Yeah. But here's the kicker. The motherboard is at least 4 or 5 years old. Yeah, so is the video card. And it suits Strix and is unable to be upgraded for Windows 11. I'd be surprised if it can't get, what is it, TMP 2.1? 1.1? I can't remember what the requirement was. Yeah, it's just, you probably just have to go into BIOS and flip it. You've got to have a relatively old motherboard or a relatively really low-end motherboard to have ones that won't support Windows 11. Like, there's some that they don't have the setting turned on that Windows 11 requires out of the box. And if you don't have the TPM, again, I can't remember if it's like 2.0 or whatever it is, there are ways to work around that. Not that it would encourage it, but technically you can get around that setting. But so you might not be able to do ultra, big-time, poorly optimized games. Yeah, no, I wouldn't worry about it. They showed you a screenshot of the settings to upgrade Windows stated could not be upgraded. Yeah, no, that's the thing. Windows will say, like, hey, TPM is, you know, whatever is not on. But yeah, you can probably look up the motherboard. You just mentioned the model. You can probably look that up and then look up, you know, Windows 11 or whatever. And there's a good chance it'll mention it. If, for example, like, and if you were to run a situation where the motherboard actually very genuinely strictly cannot, buying the computer if you're getting a good price and then swapping the motherboard wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Is it critical you upgrade to Windows 11? I mean, Windows 10 is having support dropped for it. And it is one of those things that usually you'll have some people who've got 0-day vulnerabilities that they'll just sit on until the, you know, all support is dropping. And then they will, like, immediately execute once the security updates stop popping out. Because they know there's going to be a bunch of people who don't update, and then they're no longer getting the updates for, like, antivirus and all that. So that's when they're going to probably get the most quote-unquote bang for their buck. From that vulnerability. I did not think that through. Yeah, no, absolutely. You haven't switched to Windows 11 because you're waiting for Steam. for the Steam frame to switch to Linux. Yeah, just be careful if you're still running Windows 10. Whether you go to Windows 11 or Linux, pretty soon 10 is going to be dangerous to be on. It's the same thing that happened with 7 and 8 and XP and 98 SE and all of them. Once they stop supporting it for security stuff, you almost always have a couple of 0 days show up immediately. And like I said, it's people who have figured those out who are quietly sitting on them, kind of waiting for a good time to take advantage. You know, because there's money to be made doing that. And when you know that you're not going to get a security update for a while, it's a good time to move. You don't get it. If there is a 0 day, why didn't they use the ability anytime during Windows 10 days? How does the lack of support stop a 0 day? It doesn't stop a 0 day. It stops them from fixing a 0 day. So if you think about it, if like right now someone drops a 0 day vulnerability on Windows 11, that's being actively updated. Microsoft goes, oh crap, a bunch of our computers are getting hacked. We need to put out an out-of-band security patch. And so, as fast as they can turn around and put a security patch, one comes out, and now the vulnerability is patched and no longer going to be attacked by updated machines. You'll have some that won't get the update, they'll still get attacked. But, like, the number of computers you're going to be able to compromise will be massively reduced. But with Windows 10, if it's out of not getting any more support, that means you release it, and it'll continue to go around for however long people are using Windows 10. Unless people are running antiviruses that separately get updated, which does happen. So either way, the vulnerability will get out there. Just on one end, it's going to get fixed. On the other end, it won't get fixed, depending on if it's, in support or out support. Yep, exactly. Exactly as Burning Sun saying. And like people be like, how dare they drop support for Windows 10? And it's like, okay, but genuinely it makes sense that eventually you have to stop supporting a product that you are no longer selling. Now you can argue how long is appropriate and, whatever, but there is definitely a point, like, it's the same thing with games, that a game will come out maybe for 1, 2, 3 years, they might add updates, they might add content, they might, fix bugs, but, eventually there's a point where they're not making enough money to continue supporting it. Why don't they continue to support older operating system? How hard is that? Oh, that can cost serious money. Supporting old stuff, because it's the dev hours is the big expense. It's not the download. It's the developers going, okay, let me crack out the old Windows repository. Okay, so someone reported that XYZ is going on, and a lot of the information is usually not enough to find the vulnerability by itself, so you got to start fishing through the code going, okay, where's the problem? Ah, I see. So I got to fix this thing. Well, if I fix that thing by just saying don't do that, it breaks all this functionality. So now I got to retool the functionality such that I stop the vulnerability and I don't break the functionality that was where the vulnerability was located. And it can take a lot of time and effort. You can have hundreds to thousands of dev hours fixing something that on paper looks, seemingly pretty innocuous. Yep, it's the cost of people having to do it, not the transmission costs. Transmission costs can be a decent amount, but as something is used less and less, the upload-download becomes less and less of a thing because less and less people are grabbing it. But yeah, no, the dev hours, because if you think, like, the cost of downloading, let's say it's 200 meg, is actually not that much. But, you're talking throwing some pennies across the counter. Meanwhile, on the other hand, the cost for a developer spending 200-300 hours patching a bug at, $30-40 an hour, could that now be handed off to an AI? No. You do not want that handed off to an AI. You absolutely do not want that handed off to an AI. That won't get rid of vulnerabilities, that'll add vulnerabilities. People assume AI is far, far more capable than it really is. Like, very genuinely, AI cannot just, unsupervised do anything. Yeah, the way to think about it when it comes to the capabilities of AI right now is it a task you would hand over to an unsupervised toddler? If the answer is anything but yes, you don't want the AI doing it without supervision. And even that, like, to give you an idea, recently Blue Sky had a major outage that lasted for like several days. And the accusation that, what basically was happening is everyone was like, hey, hey, like, stop using all your AI coding. It's showing in the quality of your work. Your website's barely functional right now. And Blue Sky pushed back and was like, hey, it's not a code quality problem. It is a DDoS. We are being attacked. And DDoS stands for denial of service attack, or distributed denial of service attack. And basically the idea is it's effectively like you have the system that's just attacking it by just trying to open it a bajillion times so that you can't handle the load. And so what ends up happening is it all goes down and they do their post-mortem, which is where you go, okay, there was an outage, what actually happened? Now that we've been able to track down the problem, fix it, and move on. And technically it was both. It was having a denial of service attack caused by their own software because it kept calling itself at absolutely absurd amounts. So their low-quality vibe code was calling a function literally thousands of times a second, effectively shutting down their service by overwhelming it. And yeah, that's the problem with AI, is AI doesn't and cannot inherently understand what it's doing. It just knows to go through those things and just kind of do that. Yeah, that caused an Amazon crash a bit back. Their own server spammed their own system and crashed itself. Yep. And a lot of that's coming that we are seeing more and more dips in quality of code as AI is becoming more prevalent. Because, sure, in a perfect world, you would use the AI and you would double and triple and quadruple check it and all that. But the time it takes you to do all those checks to make sure it didn't do a crap job, the reality is, you could have just done it. The fact that you have to be so diligent in double-checking its work basically takes away any benefit it would give you. If you're doing, like, fast and messy prototyping, there's arguments to be made there, but your fast and messy prototyping should never go into production. And even then, you probably, if you're doing fast and messy prototyping to just prove out a concept, if you do decide to move forward, you shouldn't take that fast, messy prototype and move forward. You should go, okay, the business thing is here. Like, people want this, and you should start from scratch and just do it well. But that's not how it works, because convincing your boss, hey, I made this thing and it technically works, I need to start over and put a bunch of time into making it right, and the boss looks at it and goes, but it works, it's just buggy, fix it. And you're like, it's not that easy. But that's always been a thing. There's always been a battle between devs and going to their boss and being like, hey, I need time to make this fixed. How much time? A lot of it. Because the whole 90% of the time is work and or 90% of the work is done in 10% of the time, 10% of the work is done in 90% of the time. It's getting that last 10% of things to be like smooth and good is where 90% of your work is. You can get something that loosely looks functional and works very buggy and all that, is just a huge time sink to get at that last little bit. Because it's all the little stuff. And yet people are losing jobs? Yeah. I mean, the thing to keep in mind, there's a lot of stuff going in that's causing the adoption of AI for that. You do have the fact that investors have sunk copious amounts of money into it, way beyond even the wildest dreams of what AI could produce. More money has been dumped into it than even the most optimistic estimates. So there's going to be people left with a bag and losing a boatload of money. But the more you can continue to chuck money into that fire to hopefully nudge it up or prolong it, you might be able to get your money out of it before the floor drops. So there's like all that investor shenanigans that has nothing to do with the actual capabilities of it. That's effectively legalized gambling. that you can do influencing it through pump and dumps and all sorts of stuff. Even though a lot of that is illegal, there's a lot of ways you can kind of skate along the borders of legal. And then you have like the human side of it, which it's very difficult to measure a lot of those things, like the productivity and all that in the short term and those kind of things. That is something that a lot of people have been putting tremendous hours into, estimating. I'm not sure what the AI is doing right now. It's doing something. Yeah, quality is hard to quantify. Exactly. Quality is very hard to quantify. Quantity is literally definition quantifiable. AI can put out quantity but not quality. Correct. Are you just not going to do this row on this edge this time for some reason? I'm very curious how this is going to go. Let's see. Use online portals for your job, medical credentials, and billing. You notice a lot of those portals are running slowly, outright breaking because it tries to redirect too many times. You have to clear out the cookies wholesale, and even then, there isn't the problem with these sites. They still barely function and have awful UI. Every time you run into a bad UI webpage, you think about what Rual would say. I have certainly been guilty of those early in my career, which is why I got paid good money for my experience. Because I stopped making websites like that once I had experience. And the problem with a lot of how AI goes, it consumes just code that's out there. Like it goes to GitHub and scrapes and do all that kind of stuff. Which means it's scraping the good code. It's also scraping the bad code. And all it cares is what it sees the most of, and is there like people saying negative or positive things around it. And when I say that, it doesn't actually understand the negative and positive things. All it catches is this word, is this word a vaguely negative word, or is this word a vaguely positive things? So if someone says, that is bad AF, but like in a positive meaning, it goes, bad, don't do this. This is an oversimplification. Most of them will probably catch that specific example. Rual wouldn't let this suck so much. I have had to let some pretty awful websites and pretty awful applications through because of business requirements and deadlines. It is a very frustrating thing when that happens, because you're like, I don't want my name associated with this hot piece of garbage. It does happen, though. I've made comments about where, like, as a developer, you'll go, how long does this take? Oh yeah, this is going to take 2 months. And they go, well, you got a week. And I'm like, well, you're not going to get what you asked for. And there's also times where it's gone to something where I've just said, they're like, oh, this takes 2 months. And you're like, well, you have a week. It's like, well, that's too bad. You're not getting it before 2 months. Like, it's like 2 months is the optimistic number. And to the credit, the times I have pushed that hard back, usually the person's like, okay, 2 months. How's the farm going today? It's going good. We've only been farming for maybe 40 minutes, maybe an hour, something like that. I was doing a lot of Kerbal Space Program beforehand, or just like, you know what? I'm ready for something else. Like, I love some Kerbal, but I was just feeling a need to do not Kerbal for a minute. Yeah, and that's a tug of war between the higher ups. It can be very stressful, but I actually really liked my work as a team lead. The way I looked at working as a team lead when I was a software developer was it was my job to stand between my dev team and management, where I was both there to represent management and the dev team. So there were definitely times I went to the dev team and they're like, okay, this is going to take us a bunch of time. And I'm like, all right, I need you to explain why. Like, I'm willing to go to bat for you. I will absolutely go to bat for you. This is a modded map. This is Frontier. It's like Frontier. It's Frontier something. Ooh, Frontier Lands or something like that. It is a modded map. But if you search for it, I think it'll be the only one that shows for Frontier. But yeah, there's definitely that time that you stand between them and you're like, I need you to explain like why this is going to take so long. And sometimes I can back it up. Sometimes I'll be like, hey, it's going to take this long because it's tied into this data set that's going to be this whole thing. I'm like, oh, crap, you're going to have to rework that whole thing? Yeah, you'll get your 2 months. And I have had that once or twice where you're like, all right, we need to do a button here that changes this. Yeah, it's going to be 3 weeks. And you sit there and go, all right, let's talk. Between you and me, I've been in that code base. This is not 3 weeks. This is UI to just move to the other function. I'll give you extra days because we need to test it and everything. But let's, I'm going to go to bat against management. Don't feed me a lie. And the person's like, yeah, it's not going to take that long. I'm sorry. Like, I just overestimated. And it's like, that's fine. But there's also definitely the other times where you go to management like, well, we need this next month. It's like, I can't get that to you. Like, well, what if we throw more people at it? Cool. Can you throw more people at it 3 months ago? Because if you do that, then I can get it to you. But it's too late to throw more people at it. If you throw more people at it, I can get you something faster in 3 months from now. But there's training time. There's a lag before you get the productivity from those people. So if you want this in that time, it ain't happening. You needed to talk to yesterday you to get that. Now, so your sister works in IT at the local school district, but used to do IT and pre-press at a local newspaper. Took over the school newsletter even though there's nowhere in her job description because she has pre-press layout experience, was screaming at her about how bad the newsletter was and she couldn't handle it anymore. Oh yeah. No, especially if something like school newspapers can be running almost entirely on volunteer work. And when you're taking volunteers, you get what you get. If you get something good, you smile and you say, thank goodness. If you get someone who really doesn't know what they're doing, but they're willing to do the time, you just accept the quality's not going to quite be there, but at least get worked on. I was going to say get done, but let's be realistic. It may or may not get done depending on how inexperienced, whatever they are. So I bet you used Agile software development tools to run your department. Primarily we were Agile Scrum, and I know there's a lot of people who don't like Scrum. There's definitely, Agile Scrum can be as much a burden as an asset. It really depends on if you're running it well or not. It can also depend on your team makeup. If you're trying to run Agile Scrum and you've got a team of 50 people, just don't. Just don't. There's no way to make those meetings work with that size. But if you're dealing with a team of like 8 people, do it. But you gotta really stay on top of those meetings and be like, hey, you basically tell me what you're working on, what you're going to be working on, are you stuck? I don't care about how your kid's doing. I don't care about anything else. I don't care about the excuses. That's for later discussion. Just get through the 8 people. Who's stuck? Who needs help? Where can the help come from? And then we can circle back if someone is not meeting their deadlines, pull them aside individually and be like, hey man, what's going on? Like, is it completely justified and all that, or not? Did you take a course to become Agile Scrum Owner? I did not. They do offer courses, and I hear that it can be pretty good. For me, I was tired of the way things were working in the department, because they really kind of weren't, and we were looking into solutions, and I got people bought into potentially pursuing that methodology versus we were doing what was known as waterfall before. And by waterfall, I mean not actually having a plan. So, waterfall but bad. And so, we got people bought in, and just having any type of organization around it was an improvement. And low-key, it got a middle manager out from in between as much as possible, which was the key feature. Which is not technically part of Agile Scrum, but it did get a person who kept injecting themselves in the middle of everything out of the way so we could actually do our jobs. Versus them feeling like they needed to always change something to justify their existence. Not that that person got fired. They just continued to work on all the IT projects that actually did need a decision maker versus day-to-day dev stuff where we're like, look man, if it's a new project, sure, bring yourself in, we'll have to, hash out the business details. But like, for the day-to-day of, we have these 5 tasks, are they, moving as planned, all that, we don't need to circle the wagons and spend 2 hours hashing out just, hey, everything's moving as planned, except this one thing, let's go ahead and throw this extra person on it, we had this on the junior dev. This is kind of a thing that really needs someone with a little bit extra experience. Your favorite is Agile when it's actually Waterfall? Yeah, it's Waterfall, but they yell at you more. It's Waterfall, but they want it faster. And with less resources. How much would a simulated farm if a simulated farm could farm? Well, I mean, the farm probably wouldn't farm very well. That's the farmer's job. The farm is a location. So probably not at all? The farm is just a place. So you led daily stand-ups and sprints? Well, the sprints aren't daily, but yeah, we would do our daily stand-up. Which, like I said, to do that effectively, it's very much you should be able to go in and get through your entire team and finish your stand-up in like, 10-15 minutes. And like for us, because everyone kind of arrived at the same time and no one really got into their work, because people would start up, you'd jump in, you'd get your email at the beginning of the morning, you'd get your coffee or whatever. So usually if you started that like 10-15 minutes after, and you wouldn't drag and like delay the whole thing till everyone's there, it's like, here's the time, if people miss it, that's whatever. You touch base with them then. They might not get the help they need that day until you can circle past them. But it's definitely one of those things, you have that thing where it's like, here's your 10-15 minutes, cool, we're done. Move on, get about your day. If anyone starts going longer than the 10 minutes, you're like, hey, you got to take that off this meeting. Get whoever's involved in that project or whoever needs to be involved, like whatever. Because that's the whole point of the stand-up, is just strictly, is there a resource that needs to be kind of reallocated? It's kind of the big to get out of that. Does something need to be changed direction? Do we need to do planning? Do we need to do whatever? Just find out that needs doing in that stand-up. And then, and sometimes it is, you have that stand-up, you're like, oh, that's a major pivot. Okay, after this meeting, we're having a big meeting to, like, deal with this. But most of the time, like, 95% of your stand-up meetings should just be like, I'm working on X, I'm working on X, I'm working on X, I'm working on X. Oh, person with Y, hey, this person, do you have the bandwidth to help with that? Or, okay, put that aside, work on the other thing, we're going to circle back to that when we have more bandwidth or whatever. Or, okay, stop working on that, I got to go bug the boss and see what they want with that. So stand-up were blockers to teams, team complete tasks. Correct. That's the thing, is you're looking for blockers and things hanging it up. Otherwise, like you said, you want that meeting to be in, out, done. If it starts to drag out to half an hour, something is wrong. You are now eating up your production time with meeting. And that can be worth it. Like I said, you'll have that meeting where you have a stand-up and someone's like, well, I'm delayed due to this problem. And you'll be like, oh, that is a major design problem. Hang on. Everyone needs to stop. We have to take, like, this is not a stand-up meeting anymore. Like, this is a major setback meeting. we gotta take this. And hopefully you don't run into that. But sometimes you will run into the thing where it's like, oh, this is not going the way we expect it. Or, like, not that you want layoffs, but if, half your department gets laid off, you go, okay, all those deadlines and all that set, all of that's in the garbage. We're going to have a whole meeting about replanning what we're getting done this sprint because there's less of us now. Unfortunately, I never ran into that problem. I did have one, it's like, we need to shrink the team. It's like, okay, well, I'm not doing that. You're like, what do you mean? Like, I'm not doing it. It's like, everyone here is required. It's like, well, we need to shrink the budget. I'm like, well, I'm not doing it. You can fire me. I'm not making that call. My stance is, if you want your things delivered, you need everyone. If you want these things delivered, everyone has to be here. If you want to cut anyone loose, that's a you problem. You get to make that call. Like, I know how much money you're making. I know you've got the budget for it. I'm not letting you take my team. You could fire me and find someone else to do your work. Which thankfully didn't happen. I always figured I'd rather lose a job I didn't want to work at than, and create a job I do. But then how do you keep the line going up? Well, that's the thing. The line was already going up. Like, if the company's struggling, you know, I understand these things have to happen. Like, if we're looking at line go down, we're like, okay, hang on, line is going down. This is going to be a problem. Like, we do have to right this ship. In that case, I'd be like, all right, I get it. We're gonna let deadlines slip and all that. We just need to decide what deadlines we're allowed to slip, and I'll make the call. But that's never what it was. It was line go up, but line didn't go up as up wanted line go. And so I'm like, hey man, we were still profitable, and not a little. It's like, I'm not letting people go unless they've earned being let go in that case. Yeah, well, yeah, you provided a timeline and scope of the project already approved. Yep. Oh yeah, no, and I've had that discussion where, you know, it's like, okay, well, here's the deadline or whatever, and then, you know, like, here's the ETA for this project, and they'll sit there and they'll sign, so it's like, all right, well, that's gonna push back this project. Well, it's like, oh, it's a little task, it probably won't push it back right much. Correct. And then you keep getting, like, you know, the next thing, you're like, hey man, this is gonna keep, like, you're going to delay this major project, you keep adding these things. And then they go, okay, well, where are we on that original ETA? It's like, well, you inserted all these other projects in here, so we're about a week behind where you wanted it. But I kept warning you you're going to be setting this back more and more, so that is on you. Usually I would say, like, you're going to set this back at least a day. And in the moment, they're like, oh, yeah, that's no problem. But then, like, at the end, they're like, why is this a week behind? It's like, you kept delaying it a day. I told you. Scope creep is scope creep. Well, that one even isn't even scope creep. Scope creep is definitely a thing that happens, and it'll get you. That's just interrupting work with other work. Because a lot of times they'll be like, oh, you're working on this project. Hey, can you pull numbers for marketing? Sure, that's gonna, you know, take me a little bit of time. Like, you know, individually, that's only, you know, an hour or two or whatever to pull those numbers, run the reports and everything, but that's fine. But, like, you know, when you tell me to do that, like, the 10th time on an ongoing project, that's a day I've lost. Probably 2. Your favorite thing is telling people your actions or lack of action will have consequences. And then they get all surprised, Pikachu, when the consequences show up. Oh, yeah, no, I've only had one job I had to do it. Like, most of the jobs, if I was saying, hey, I can work on that, but that's going to delay this other thing a couple days. And they're like, yeah, that's no problem. And it's like, you know, they might forget about it. It's like, no, you're right. I did have one job that, like, I very much had to, you know, quote-unquote, keep the receipts. That, my boss is ready to throw anyone under the bus, so I kept the email chains. Anytime he'd try and tell me something in passing, I'm like, until it's in my email, this conversation didn't happen. Whatever you tell me you need, I need it in writing. That way, tomorrow when I come back, I know what your priorities are, and I can act on them. And when someone asks me why something is or isn't done, I can give them a why. And he would bristle and fight so hard to not have that paper trail. And I'm like, it's simple. Till I have it, I don't work. Or if not an email, like a JIRA ticket or whatever. I'm not picky about what my paper trail is. Just until I have, like, some official thing saying, I want you to work on this. Unless it's something, like, that's a complete nothing burger, like, hey, that word's typoed, okay, boom, whatever. But anything of substance, I'm like, yeah, I need you to send me something that is documentation of this. An email is fine, a JIRA ticket is fine, because if you send me an email, I'm gonna add a JIRA ticket. Preference, JIRA or TFS? Historically, I would definitely say TFS. I haven't heard someone mention TFS in like 8 years. I was salty when we switched over to JIRA. JIRA's fine. It's more familiarity than anything. I liked TFS because at the time, TFS tied way better into source control. I was also that worker who, you know, there would be something going on, and my boss would come and he's like, hey, I need to reprioritize away from that marketing project over for the purchasing project, like whatever's going on. And I would absolutely CC both parties involved. Because otherwise he would throw me under the bus when, you know, the marketing project wasn't due when the marketing people expected it. And it'd be like, okay. And it'd be like, all right, so you're having me reprioritize off of the marketing project over the purchasing project. Okay, so the purchasing project's going to take us at least 2 weeks, so the marketing project's going to be that far behind. Pass that email off to CC both the people in charge of the marketing and purchasing projects. And then, of course, the marketing project person immediately hear my boss's phone ring. I'm like, you're just arbitrarily telling me things and not verifying with the stakeholders, are you? I'm not the one who's going to be caught with that. I know better. Even if that's ultimately the business decision that makes sense. I don't want to be the one who's seen as the responsible party when one of those is delayed or whatever. That is above my pay grade to put my head on that chopping block. Yeah, you learn to play the corporate politics. I've worked a couple very corporate jobs. That was the only, and all these things I'm talking about is one job. But that was the one job that, like I said, you cross your T's, you dot your I's, you keep your receipts, and any communication that's not written down didn't happen. Unless we're talking about unionizing. Don't write that down. Not until you're ready to act. Yeah, no, that was 100% that boss was ready to chuck you under the bus the moment problems were there. Even minuscule, insignificant problems. But a lot of corporate jobs are covering your butt, making sure you're not the one who catches the flack when things get messy. When things are good, you usually don't have much to worry about. But the problem is, you gotta keep records of everything because you don't know when things are gonna flip from good to bad. Sometimes you'll have some forenotice. Not a lot of time. Let's see, the funniest thing is when there was a major launch at your old job where you had to get something live within 2 hours that was dependent on another thing that can take up to 72 hours and no way to prioritize it on your end. Excellent. Yeah, you always loved your old manager. She was doing the cover your butt for us. Yep, I did that for my team. Because I had a lot of well-meaning people on my team. They're like, oh, it's not a big thing, you know, I just got asked by Carl to do this. I'm like, no. No, you don't. You make sure that crap goes in the system. Like, I understand it's not a big deal, but this is a thing you need to have as a habit, is to always put stuff in the system. That way when Carl asks you to do something that Carl wasn't told to ask you to do something, it's not your neck on the chopping block. There's no judgment on Carl. Carl's a good dude. But, like, you make sure everything is documented here. There are people more than ready to just throw you right under the bus, and you gotta make sure they don't have the ammunition to do it. And if they do it anyways, then you can go and take that and put in a thing for wrongful termination, or whatever's appropriate. Or not, like it's right to work at will state, whatever you want to go to, if they don't provide a reason. But a lot of people feel very, very much like they really need to provide a reason. And if they provide a reason, and it's completely legitimate, that could be a payday for you. Not like lawsuit payday, but wrongful termination. That means you're at least going to get some pay for a little while. And believe me, those people got hit with wrongful termination more than once because, one, they did stuff that deserved wrongful termination, like to be warranted, and they wrote it down. This is one thing anxiety can be good for. Yeah, like, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you. I mean, by definition, that means that, but still. Because it's not paranoia if it's not irrational. That's just fear. And so your mom used to be an internal auditor at a bank, and it's amazing how many things her bosses wanted her to do that stopped asking for when she asked for instructions in writing. Yep. Nothing that would be like, well, no, that's not true. Not often. I didn't often get asked for something that I'm like, hey, that's a no because I'm not committing a crime. I did have, like, 2 separate times I got asked to do something at a job, and it was on the dev side, where it was like, I'm not going to do that because that's illegal. And the one was just like genuine ignorance that the person just didn't think through what the action would do, and it'd be breaking, like, you know, privacy laws, data sharing laws. You're like, yeah, I'm not going to do the thing you just asked me because we will be fined so fast. It's like, I understand why you want this and what good business opportunity is, but there's also very legitimate reasons why we're not allowed to do this. Which aren't the thing you're trying to do, admittedly. But you're not far from the mark. I know one that I fought back with was... It was a, like, the company did a lot of things, but this was just on, like, a web portal kind of thing where you could, you know, do sales. I'm trying to avoid saying what the product is because it's a small enough industry. It can be narrowed down. But basically we had this portal, and the idea was if you were stepping away from this, we weren't getting the sale, is the important detail. And so the idea was when you would click away from the website, that it would intercept the, like, the request to leave the website, unless you, like, clicked onto another website. But if you just click, like, your back button or whatever, or your, I think it was your home button we could also intercept, that if you hit those, we would grab the event that was navigate away from, and we would show you a pop-up with a discount. And my boss, like, you need to do that. I'm like, I'm not doing that. You are going to piss off people so badly. You're going to take our legitimate customers who are paying us money, who might just be price checking something, and when they hit away, you're going to slap them with a pop-up ad. You are going to royally cheese people off with this. I'm not doing it. And my boss was very adamant and kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and I was finally like, all right, here's the deal. You give me this in writing, where I'm telling you this is a bad idea, and I'm not the kind of person who turns around and goes, you know, hey, I was right, like you were wrong. I am going to do that in this case. Like, I am telling you in advance, I believe so strongly in this, I will absolutely rub your face in it on the other side. And he pushed. And shocker, within 2 hours of that thing going up, we got a call from the CEO of the company telling us to take it back down. Which I had implemented it such that it could be removed immediately. I made sure that thing was a whole separate thing over here that I called over to. That way, the moment we got the pull the plug, I could just turn off the thing that called over to it, and done. Let's see, there was a case here that dragged out the company for 5 years. The judge was like, because of this stuff, you owe double pay for each paycheck mix due to wrongful termination. This case counts as work time at the company. Yeah, no, I've been happy to see more and more judges doing that kind of thing. Because there's a whole thing that a lot of companies will do where they'll just deliberately drag out litigation, either one, to bleed the person dry so they can't keep fighting their case, or just to be, like, vindictive so, like, other people considering fighting stuff are just like, it's not worth it. And I've been happy to see more and more judges when that kind of thing comes up where it's very clear the company is deliberately just using litigation for malicious intent, that the judge is like, okay, they asked for 100,000, well, they're getting 250,000 now because you've drugged this out for years, and we feel their time is worth at least this much, and so we are going to award the entire value plus the maximum it'll allow, and then also we're going to kind of fine you on top of it. Basically, the proverbial throw the book at them. And I very much appreciate when those kind of things happen, when, again, when a company or an individual is clearly using, you know, using the judge as a weapon to just kind of be a jerk. Let's see, in her mom's case, she kept backups of all the important documents in safe boxes at home, because some stuff that they were trying to do was illegal. Your mom had wanted to be able to prove that she had nothing to do with it, anything like that if needed. Yeah, no, especially with stuff like, especially you hear things like, you know, nonsense like what happened with like Enron and all that. If you're that person who's stuck in the middle of it, you want to be like, hey man, I was not involved. This is me covering my butt. I was asked to do things. I can't confirm or deny that they did them, but I can tell you if they did them, I was absolutely completely uninvolved and deliberately removed myself from being potentially involved. You've known a few websites you do that, and it's the worst, especially with, if you have the side mouse buttons. Oh yeah, no, like I said, that was something I got asked to do, and I fought tooth and nail to the point where I didn't push that one to the point as, like, you're going to have to fire me. I wasn't that adamant to it, because I have definitely put my job on the line a number of times. But I definitely fought really hard to the point where I was like, you know what? Here's the deal. If you want it, I need this in writing. I need it in writing in the context where I am telling you this is a terrible idea, and I am going to lord that over you. Like, this is how passionately I feel about this. I am absolutely going to lord this over you on the other side of this and tell you I told you so. I expected him to back down when I said that, because I had never done that to him before. Like, there was definitely times like, you're gonna regret doing this. Like, you know, I am the person you are hiring to advise you, and I'm telling you, no. But if you push it, I will do it. And also the mobile apps that won't quit with the back button. Holy super. That is another thing I miss from the Windows Phone days. Windows Phone had a rule that if you hit to close an application, it was required to close and do whatever it needed to you know, facilitate closing within X number of seconds, or the operating system would simply kill the task. So if you had something that just took a long time to save while closing, or was doing a bunch of calls out to a server or whatever while closing, and it took too long, it just killed it. But it was important because there was a lot of applications, even like with Steam games you run to that, where you go to close the game and it hangs for like a full minute while it's doing a whole bunch of work shutting down after you've got your save file already closed. So it's not just, you know, handling your save file. And you're like, dude, just close. Just kill your executable. Like, just do your cleanup and get rid of it. If you're handling your crap right, it shouldn't take this long. And yeah, I miss that about like Windows Phone, about like, here's the deal. Your crap will close after this many seconds. There isn't a, but wait, I'm not ready. Do not make me bring the task manager in here. It's pretty much what it was. You need the fact that I'm ignoring my advice. I needed it noted in triplicate so I could wave it in your face. Oh yeah, no, and I like, with that particular one, I brought that up every single time after that. Every single time he brought up an idea that I'm like, no, this is a really bad idea. Not something that's like, I disagree. Like, there's a difference. There's, I disagree with this, and then there's like, no, this is really, like, don't do this, this is a bad idea. I think of the follow, welcome to the stream. When I was like that adamant where it's like, no, this is a terrible idea, we should not do. It was very much like, do you need me to get the email? I will bring the email here. Because, for the record, every single time that I put my foot down and was like, hey man, we shouldn't do this, I was right. It's why I was being paid what I was being paid. I had the expertise and experience on those things, and I wouldn't put my foot down if I didn't know for sure. Or at least had, like, an incredibly high level of confidence. As your mom works at public administration for the county, you had a mayor had the brilliant idea that needed to be countersigned by her for it to be legality. She was like, you can sign in lieu of me. I'm not going to get smoke slingshot at me between bars. I have kids to raise. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I was lucky. Like I said, I only got asked to do stuff that was illegal twice. And one, the person was just completely ignorant of why it would be illegal. Like, when I was like, no, that's actually against the law, and they're like, but why? And it's like, well, while you're trying to use it for what's arguably a productive thing, that exact same thing, ever so slightly switched, can actually be used for a pretty freaking awful nefarious thing. And like I said, I can't remember the details of what it was, but it was like a privacy violation kind of thing. And that was like right around the time that GDRP was kind of becoming, I think it had just passed and was going into effect. And it wasn't GDRP that did it. We actually had laws in the US that also covered it. But it took it from like, this is kind of a minor infraction to like, no, this is going to be a real big no-no pretty soon. Like right now, we'll get a slap on the wrist and maybe a fine. On the other side of this litigation, we're going to get a major fine. And we will deserve it too. It's not like, oh, come on, we should be allowed to do this. Like, no, we're not allowed to do that for a real good reason. Like, and to give you a difference of how different companies operated, a much better company I worked at before, we were working on a project, and this is, like, Twitter was a new fandangled thing, and yeah, we were explicitly disallowed to, yeah, but Twitter was relatively new. Facebook had been around for a little while and all that, and what we were trying to do is we were trying to help our customers, who were a bunch of stuff like Society of Mechanical Engineers and the Canadian Scouts and all those kind of things, that a lot of these organizations would have members and all that. And what we were trying to do is figure out which members were, like, you know, you've only got so much resources you can allocate. So when they go to give, like, t-shirts and all that kind of crap out, be like, what members should you give this to? Like, what members will you give this to that you're likely to get the most benefit from, the most marketing from? And the way we were going to do that is we're going to go to, like, they had their websites for handling, you know, comments, forums, whatever, and we would scrape that, and then we would scrape stuff like Facebook and everything related to their associations and all that. And the idea was to build up a profile and be like, here are people talking positively about you and negatively about you. And again, this is before we had any of these privacy laws or any of that kind of stuff going on. And it was like genuinely meant for a relatively positive thing of being like, hey, who are the people that if you send them a t-shirt, they're going to write something positive about it? And we would just give you like an arbitrary score. And this is still very much in a prototype phase. And we started this, and very, very quickly we're like, oh, we can build up a very invasive profile about people doing this. This isn't where we can kind of vaguely get an idea of someone, are they speaking good or bad about this? Like, we can build up a profile that gets very detailed about just about everything about it. This is way more information than we should have, and is way more invasive and uncomfortable. And, you know, to the credit, we were in the exploration level of this, and me and the other guy working on the project, you know, it's like, hey, this works. We can do this. We think you should shut it down right now before we take it any farther. Like, we think this project should die right here. It's like, you could easily make a bunch of money, and 100% this should be illegal. And to the company's credit, they're like, yep, we're shutting it down. Thank you for your time working on that project. But could it predict, they were pregnant before they knew, coughed, target, carp? We didn't have anything like that, but it was definitely one of those things that you could build up. Like, this is the kind of, and like, for the record, that product became a thing that is an incredibly lucrative business that is in constant fights of litigation that data collectors and data brokers use. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a thing, but you gotta be pretty willing to be a crappy person to use these types of systems, like build up these profiles to get to know absolutely everything intimately about a person and then sell that information out into someone else. And we were definitely like, yeah, you can make money doing this. And we even told them, it's like, there's probably a lot of money to be made here. But like, this is really ick-scuzzy, really not great stuff. And that company was 100% like, nope, we don't want that. Like, it doesn't matter if it makes us money. Like, that's not what we want our company to do. And to be fair, there was another company out there somewhere who was like, absolutely, cut that check. I don't know who they were, because I wasn't involved and we didn't send on that work to them, but who did the exact same thing, you know, a number of years later. And I'm sure there was a dozen other people who did the same project, some who would go on to make their things. I'm not trying to claim we did it first. You never know what is being incubated. I've mentioned on the channel a number of times that when I was doing the consulting side of things, I would have people ask me to sign NDAs, being like, hey man, I got this multi-million-dollar idea, so I'm going to need you to sign the NDA before we talk about it to see if you're on board. And you kind of roll your eyes at it and be like, fine, I'll sign your stupid NDA. And they'd be like, Facebook, but for musicians. And you're like, okay, so a less functional Facebook. Yeah, but for musicians. All right. Why would a musician on Facebook switch to your Facebook for musicians? Because you know what's also Facebook for musicians? Facebook. Do you know what Facebook is also? For everyone else they need to communicate with on any regular basis. What is your pitch as to why this person stops using Facebook to use your thing, or uses it as well? And they would stare at you like you just kicked their puppy. And you're like, okay, alright. Well, let's say you do manage to convince people to switch over. What is your monetization strategy? How do you make money? Ads? Alright, well, you already don't have a business plan. Like, there's a lot that goes into this. There's a reason there's not that. Also, Facebook Musicians exists. It's called MySpace. Check out how it's doing in, like, 2008. Not well. That's for sure. Let's see, just an invasive as, I'm not gonna say the name so it doesn't trigger people's things, but you know, the Amazon robot in your kitchen. Subversively listening to you without your knowledge and serving you ads based on what it heard. Don't know if that one's true. Like, that's kind of the catch. So there was rumors that your phone is listening to you at all times if you had Facebook installed, which is not true. I mean, not at the time that I'm pulling from. I can't promise you anything nowadays. The reality of what was actually happening is you would have your buddy who would have their location information, and you also have your location information turned on while you're accessing Facebook, and it would see that you and your Facebook friend are in the same place. And your Facebook friend has been searching a whole lot recently about that candy that you talked about at lunch, or maybe you didn't talk about it at lunch. Doesn't really matter. But Facebook would do the whole thing where it goes, okay, well, this person has been obsessed with this candy. They've been looking it up everywhere because we got the cookies and the tracking and all that to scrape for all that stuff. We can see that they're looking about that candy, talking about that candy and all that. And they were hanging out with you, which means they probably talked to you about that candy, which means you are probably interested in that candy. Let's serve you an ad for that candy. And you get the idea on how that works. So it doesn't really listen into you in any way, but it does do a lot of stuff where they use the data they do have and making a couple leaps in logic that usually are actually relatively sound. And they'll get it wrong sometimes. You'll be like, why is this thing telling me about boats all of a sudden? And it's because your buddy's been looking up boats, and it did the thread where you're like, ah, well, you met with your buddy and you probably talked about boats, but you didn't. So smart association, yeah. So it is one of those things, because, like, especially nowadays where we have the permissions and everything, where if you do not get Facebook permissions to access your mic, it doesn't have permissions to access your mic. It will not be accessing your mic. Not unless they're doing some zero-day vulnerability, at which point they're probably in a lot of legal trouble. From what you read, it was kind of not true. Well, it kind of is, but it kind of isn't. It was actually listening on a separate chip that only looks for the trigger to turn on the actual... Yes. Like, I can't speak for the Amazon robot. Like, I can't speak for that one. But there's a lot of times that those rumors that they're... if you remember correctly, they did... Yeah, I think Facebook did violate a zero-day vulnerability. I think it was for the iPhone at one point to accomplish something. And it wasn't even that they couldn't accomplish it without it. It was just easier to do it using the vulnerability than it was to do it properly. And so when they patched the vulnerability, it broke the Facebook app, and they had to go back and fix it. You remember Facebook stalking you through Facebook buttons on other websites? Yep. Yep, that absolutely was a thing. That there was cookie associated, or I think it was cookies associated with the buttons, and so they could grab the cookie information to build your data set. Which, again, that was the whole thing. If they saw your buddy looking up all that kind of stuff, and they'd do all that kind of thing, and then they would just, again, use association, because the goal there was to hit a customer that has just heard about something, because that's where you're likely to make your most sales. If someone is like, oh, hey, I just heard about this thing, and is potentially going to look for it the first time, and you serve that ad at just the right moment, that's the real money. That's a high conversion ad. That's where you get your real money. Versus like what Twitch does, which is just kind of hucks the ads out there and hopes for the best. There's no data behind it beyond region and whatever. I think they have like region and gender, maybe? I actually don't remember. It's not much. Oh, it's like region, gender, the category you're watching. But it's really not much information that Twitch has. So a lot of it's just shotgunning ads across the area, being like, please buy, please click through, make our advertisers happy. But that's the pro and the con, is you get less relevant ads on Twitch, but also you don't get nearly as much data invasive behavior on Twitch. And there's pros and cons, because it means you get ads that you're like, hey man, I'm struggling to pay for college. Like, hey man, new BMW, right? Am I right? You want that new Beamer? That's definitely in your budget. Nearly broke college student, correct? Let's see, there was an interview I missed. I missed the interview comment. You wouldn't mind the non-target ads if they weren't so annoying. Well, that is one thing I will hold against Twitch, is historically Twitch has not had the best for like volume balancing their ads. And what such. So it is a thing there, and there's also some ads that, like, when they get to like political ads and gambling ads and those kind of things, there's definitely a lot of type of ads. I wish I had the ability to be like, hey, I know you will give me money for people seeing this ad. I would rather not get that money to not show that specific ad. Like, on YouTube, what we can actually do is I can go to there and be like, I do not want gambling, this, and this. And there's a limit. I can only, like, limit, like, 2 or 3 or whatever categories that I say, do not show that on my channel. But it's only a couple categories. You're, like, limited to, like, 4 or 5 or something like that. And you can say, these particular categories of ads are well-aligned for my channel. So, like, the YouTube channel I have, I can go, okay, show more technology and more game ads, but also don't show like military or pharmaceutical ads. But like I said, they only give you like 3 or 4 categories, like number-wise, you're allowed to block, which means you can't block all the things you'd want to or block everything. So it is one of those things where like, okay, what do I see as the things I want to show least? And for me, I think it was gambling, pharmaceutical, and I think military, I think I put on there, I believe. Or maybe it was politics. It doesn't matter. The YouTube thing is you can buy ads to specific channels. Yeah, YouTube allows a lot of wild things. And for me, as far as I'm concerned, the moment it's like I want to put an ad on a specific channel, it should now be involving that content creator where, you know, YouTube can be like, hey, they would like to put an ad on your channel, you know, because you're targeting that closely, you know, you get to be in the negotiation to help set the price. I'd be okay with that. I would be okay with, like, you know, Degree deodorant being like, hey man, that Rual guy, we want to advertise on Rual's channel. And then I would get like something being like, Degree would like to, you know, advertise on your channel for some additional rate. And it would be the same number of ads, same time, but, you know, they would get to cut the line so that more of their ads show relative to other ads. I would actually be on board with that. I think that would be a good thing, because then you could decide, does that fit, does that whatever. And I think that would be a good thing for everyone involved, because for the viewers, you would, in theory, get more relevant ads without data invasion. You know, for me as the creator, I would potentially get a better pay, and then YouTube would, of course, scrape off the top, getting more money. New channel here. How did you come up with your name? I was a teenager playing Ultima Online and said, that sounds like a human name. And there's not anything else to it. It's not like some nod at something. It's not a reference to something. It just sounded vaguely name-like. And it stuck. It seems like a pathway to scams. Well, the assumption would be with something like that, the way you'd avoid the scam is the money would be put into an escrow. So once we agreed upon the terms and all that, that the money would be set aside. That as long as those ads are played, that money would go. And that's, to a certain degree, that is how a lot of the advertising on those content platforms work, is you'll say, I want $10,000 worth of ad space under these categories, and you would then put that money into whatever the platform is, and it would get pulled there. Yeah, no, the one people read a lot is as Rural Storge is the one I get a lot. I had debated rebranding a couple times to like something else, but I never did come up with what that other thing would be, so it just never happened. Which is fine. You're assuming Twitch doesn't allow you to run your own full screen ads? No, if I made a deal like with Dove or something like that, and I just wanted to put a full screen thing on my thing, I'm allowed to do that. Because, I mean, if you look at, like, the charity stuff, for example, you know, when we do charities for, like, Hope for the Day and all that, a lot of times part of that charity will be playing, you know, a 30-second, minute-long video a couple times during the stream as part of the charity push. And that's basically an ad. It's for a charity, it's for a good cause, but it's an ad. Like, all things considered, it's an ad. The idea is hopefully you convert to someone who's going to put money into the charity or tell others to put money into the charity, and that, like, it is a lead generation thing. But yeah, no, I could do that. I don't think there's anything against TOS about putting an ad on there. I wouldn't be allowed to present it as if Twitch was the one running the ad. I'd have to disclose it is, like, I'd basically have to make clear it's an ad for me. But I mean, we also already have, like, right up here, you know, we have the factor thing. That's an ad. It's just not a full screen thing. I've heard that before, the Storge, as if, like, it's Greek. I don't hear that one very often. Your user's name started from a random username generator and evolved slightly since then. I've known a couple people have done that, where it just kind of takes a couple words and shoves them together. But yeah, no, actually, if you look at it, so Twitch added their sponsorship portal thing they've got going on, which for those who aren't familiar with, mostly it's hot garbage. But every once in a long while, you'll get something good around it. And what I mean by hot garbage, most of the time it'll be like, hey, you know, such and such wants to sponsor a stream for you. And they're like, okay, you know, you with 1,000 viewers, you know, like you with 1,000 average viewers, we'd like to stream on you. Like we'd like you to put the ads on your channel for 2 hours, and we're willing to give you a fiver, you know, and maybe some pocket lint and a paper clip. It's not really that bad, but you get the idea. There's like kind of the normal rate of what creators tend to charge for sponsored stream segments, and most of the sponsored stream segments coming through Twitch's like exclusive program or whatever are downright terrible. To give you an idea, the industry standard for creators for a sponsored game segment is roughly for every CCV, which is concurrent average viewership. So like right now we're sitting at 178 viewers. Just pretend that's what my average is for the whole stream. For 1 hour, it's $1 US, kind of the baseline. Some people charge more, some people charge less, but that's roughly what it would be. So for me to do a 2-hour stream at roughly the viewership we have now would be somewhere in the ballpark of like $300, 350, somewhere in that ballpark. And it can vary wildly because if they ask me for a lot of extra stuff, I'll charge them more. And just the same, if they make it like super simple and low effort, I might charge them less. Or if I see that they're a small indie team, I might charge them less because I figured they got a smaller budget. You get the idea. And so there's all that. Where you go to some of these ads that were coming across the bow through Twitch exclusive program, some of those were coming through where it's like, you know, for the exact same channel, we'll offer you $32. And you're looking there going, I'd like a winning lottery ticket too. Like, genuinely, I will lose money if I do that because less people will tune in and they won't sub and they won't use their bits and they won't do these things, which means I will actively get paid less to do that.
People need to sub and use their bits.
That's how they support the channel.
Are you being the most handsome boy on all of streamings?
Oh, absolutely not.
What? Hi, pregnant son. Hi, sheep in a cart. Okay, you have to be the most handsome boy on all of streamings.
That's
why they watch you.
Oh no, they do not watch me for my attractiveness. If that's what they came here for, they're not getting their money's worth, and it is free to be here.
Okay, that was funny.
They didn't spend a dime, and they paid too much.
Aw, thank you, Soul Adams. Oh, thank you for being so... Aw, the people have spoken.
It's the truth. I know the pecking order. I mean, the chair ranks higher than I do.
Aw, I'm heading to bed, bye.
All right, you sleep well. Do they offer you a price, or do they literally pay based? So that depends. So there's different sponsorships have different ways. Most of the sponsorships I take have what's known as a flat rate. And what flat rate means is I'm going to do my best to get people here and all that, but I'm getting paid the amount no matter who actually shows up, because that's outside of my control. So usually when I'm negotiating, say like it's 150 average viewers, because that's just easier math, and they say they want 2 hours. So, you know, the rate should be $300 using kind of the market standard. I might turn around and be like $275. That way, you know, it's kind of the under promise over deliver. I'm giving a little bit of leeway where if I have a little bit below average, they're still getting, you know, their market share, like their market's worth. That I'd have to have like a particularly bad stream for me to, you know, to like really go. And there have been times where you come up short where I'm playing a game and it is just not gelling with the viewership. We've had a couple where even though I enjoyed the game, you know, it's just a game nobody's heard of. They didn't do their marketing ahead of time. It's not very entertaining to watch. Like, you do your best to like carry the game, but sometimes that's a lot on the content creator to really carry a game. And I won't misrepresent a game. Like, even like there's only been 1 or 2 games that I was pretty underwhelmed with when we played on the channel. And usually it will be one of those things I'll be like, hey, here is the thing that I think this game does well, and here's the thing that I'm less convinced by, and all that kind of stuff. Like, I'll be honest about it. misrepresent it. Because I've only had one game that ever asked me to be like, hey, don't say anything negative about the game, period. And I didn't take that sponsorship, because also the rates sucked. You know, and I'll push back and that kind of stuff. But like, almost all the sponsorships, they say, like, hey, we want you to use your own language, we want you to be honest about the game, we just ask you don't disparage. And what they mean by that is, like, you don't go, this game's hot garbage, this game should be ashamed of itself. You know, be constructive. Be like, hey, you know what? This is a little grindy here. Hey, I really wish this mechanic worked a little different. That's all fair game. I've never had anyone push back on that kind of thing. But, you know, you do try to represent the game well, you know, for whatever it does bring to the table. And it's a thing, if a game looks terrible, I'm not going to take the sponsorship. Not to say they couldn't throw enough money at me to make me do it. If Raid Shadow Legends pops in here and says, hey man, do you want $200,000? Be like, hey man, soon as that check clears, or I have that in writing, I am down, I will sell the hell out. Because for that amount of money, it means I don't have to worry about any of this for a couple of years. And one hard sellout, I can do that. You know, not have to fuss about money for a while. They're not getting their money's worth. They are overspending in a big way at that price. But that's never happened. I have had Raid Shadow Legends reach out to me plenty of times, though. Well, yeah, I mean, it's also just a thing. Like, you look at it, it's like, okay, I mean, it'd be one thing if it's like, this is the kicking puppies game, where every time someone plays, we kick a puppy. Obviously, it's like, okay, I'm not going to sell out on that. Like, there's some real harm happening with this. But if it's just a crappy game, they're like, okay, you know, what is the harm if you take that? You know, someone might accidentally spend more than they probably should on it, which would still be crappy. Yeah, no, that's the thing. It's one of the things we try and explain to games, is that hiring a content creator is part of your marketing package. It is an intensifier, though. The way to think of it is, it's a multiplier. You still gotta have something leading into it. If you've done zero with your game's marketing, and you're like selling it in like 2 days, and you're just now reaching out to content creators, be like, hey, play for an hour, it's better than nothing, but it's gonna be real rough. You're probably not gonna sell as much as you hope. But if you've got like a little bit of hype and a little bit of momentum, and then you get some creators involved, you can turn that little bit of momentum into a ton of sales. Well, yeah, it's also like, I mean, it's being realistic. If some, like, again, it's one thing if, like, I'm trying to think of something that won't get, like, controversial or whatever. It would be something like if some highly addictive medication came around and like, hey man, it'd be like if a company selling vapes came out and was like, hey man, if you do ads for our vapes, we'll pay you a bunch of money. I would probably turn that down even if it was a very significant sum of money, because one, it's something like, I don't care if you vape, I'm not going to be pushing an addictive product on my audience, because as far as I'm concerned, at that point, I'm quite literally harming my audience for money. But it's another thing, it's like, hey, here's this crappy game that's overpaying for a sponsor thing, and I'm being like way overpaying. The harm is pretty mild, but yeah. You want a bad-looking game that sells well? Just look at, well, yeah, no, there's definitely games that don't look great, but are solid games. There are games that are also just crappy. But yeah, no, it's definitely a thing. Let's see, well, that was kind of the sentiment that was like, you know, if Raid Shadow Legends just, you know, again, cuts a check for 200,000. It'd be one of those things that's like, you know, I would have the term still require that I get to be honest about the game, because I'm sure as hell not misrepresenting myself. I don't want that coming back on me. Like, I would review it honestly, and I also don't fault anyone for who takes those things. We all gotta pay our bills, and sometimes when times are tough, it means we do things that we're not exactly the most proud of. But, you know, and it's again, like, what, the harm isn't that great with that kind of thing, it's just kind of crappy. And then some people just genuinely enjoy it, regardless. But, you know, like, It's not that big a deal. But yeah, going back to the question about based on viewership, that's actually kind of the difference between different types of sponsors. So there are most of the sponsors that we take where I just play a game for N number of hours or whatever, most of those are flat rate. I agree with them for some amount of money, and we play the game, and I get paid. And thankfully, knock on wood, I've never had anyone try and stiff me on that kind of thing. Because I do make people write up contracts and do invoice and do go through all that. You know, I make sure I'm covered. Which is half of the not fun part of streaming, is all of like, has the invoice been paid? Hey, person, this is a net 30 invoice, you're overdue, get your money over here. And like I said, I've never had a problem. I have had one or two drag their feet time-wise, but yeah. And all that. And then also, like, when you're doing the contract negotiations, hey, I see that you put this thing here, I'm not okay with that. Those kind of things. You know, and I haven't had too many. I've only had one or two, and like I said, the once or twice I've had to push back in a contract, most of the time they're like, oh, we just took a boilerplate, yeah, we'll take that off the contract, it's fine. I have had one or two who put, like, a bunch of sketchy stuff in there, but usually it's one of those things where, like, okay, here's the contract, totally sketchy, well below market value, and, like, I had one who just sent me the contract, I hadn't even talked to you, it's like, here's the contract if you're interested in working with it. It's like, no, I'm not actually. What kind of unhinged person just fires off a contract to someone, being like signed or not signed, without having any discussion beforehand? Because there are like, as content creators, you have to be careful. There are contracts to be like, hey, the contract to be like, hey, we reserve to use your likeness forever for whatever means we feel like, and within partnerships of anyone else, you're like, oh, so basically you'll have almost the same rights to me as I have to me. No. And if it were to say yes, it's going to be for a hell of a lot of money, because that'll be the end of my brand, because you're going to do whatever the hell you want with it. Let's see, imagine you showing up with a tacky, like, money glasses and necklace in order to advertise something without disparaging. Oh man, like, I'll stop shitting on Raid Shadow Legends for a second. But, like, you know, one of these, like, really kind of predatory monetization games, and be like, today we're going to be playing this mobile game, gotcha style, and just have, like, the money glasses and, like the thick things of, like, fake gold and silver on your neck, like, just fully blinged out. Why am I covering this game, you might ask? Money. Money is the answer to that question. Yeah, no, that's the thing. Like, Raid Shadow Legends gets picked on. It's actually not one of the worst ones. Like, they do get the reputation in the industry that there's a lot of times they will underpay creators. Once in a while, they'll actually give a very genuinely good sponsorship, which is part of the reason why some people will take it, is it genuinely will pay relatively well. And all that. But a lot of times they underpay you, and they pay based on activations. And that's not just Raid Shadow Legends, that's just mobile games in general, pay on what's known as activations, which is where the person's like, hey, if you download the game and you play to level 5, it helps me out. And it's because they literally don't get paid unless you play the game to level 5. Or they'll get paid extra sometimes. It really depends. Sponsorships vary wildly. But also to circling back with Brinkson, there are times that, like, for example, some of the sponsorships I've done, I'm not going to say with who because I don't know if I can, but there are some sponsorships that I have done that they're like, hey, we will pay you up to N amount of money based on viewership, and it'll take your average viewership. And some of those tend to be a little lowball, but they can actually work out relatively well. Usually with those, I think it's been all but like one or two, I get the full volume, because when I run a sponsorship, I deliberately try to run it at a time I know I'm going to have viewers, because, you know, I'm being paid. I want to make sure they feel like they get their money's worth so that they come back and do it again, because I like eating. So I end up getting well past my average viewership. And yeah, that's fine. But it is one of those things. If I have some random game be like, hey, we'll pay you based on this amount, based on average viewership up to this amount, I'm gonna be a lot more pushing back for something more favorable to my terms, just because there's the fuzziness around it. And depending on the stream you're watching, you'll be very loyal in doing what they need to get paid. Yeah, and that's kind of what the sponsors are counting on. So very generally, there's been a big push for like, and you could read about in, like, Kotaku and all that. There's been more and more of a push for video game marketing and other things for trying to reach young audiences, which is a very, very broad thing. Like, people in their 30s and 40s are considered young in this context. That more and more they're leaning on influencers, which includes streamers and content creators on YouTube. It's just kind of the big Instagram, all that. That they're finding more and more that among those brackets, going to a small to mid-sized creator is kind of becoming the sweet spot for money spend versus, you know, conversion, which is what they care about. So with that marketing, any type of advertising you're doing, you care about the conversion rate. That is your king thing there. What the conversion rate is of the number of people exposed to this ad, how many of them are actually going to do whatever it is you've asked. Wish list, buy the game, that kind of thing. That's ultimately what the person paying for the ad wants, is as high of a conversion rate as possible. And something that gives a higher conversion rate, they're willing to spend more money on. Because if I spend $1,000 to get, you know, 1 million impressions on AdSense, and I get like 3 conversions out of that, that sucks. Versus if I spend a bit more than that on a couple of content creators, and they get 100 conversions, that's really good, even if the number of impressions was nowhere near the same. Yeah, especially with bot views and clicks and all that. But what they're finding is with content creators, and it's two sides to this. One is because with me and my audience, I develop a more authentic relationship with people where, generally speaking, there is a higher level of trust in me than going to like Google and having a banner appear. So there's a higher level of trust there. But part of the other side of that trust is when some random company says, we want to advertise with you, and I look at it and go, no, your product's crap. I wouldn't say it that way. I was like, no, thank you. Like, I'm not interested in advertising your product on my channel, you know, because it's a crap product. There's a reason that trust exists. I am vetting the things coming across. I have a number of games I turned out. Now, granted, most of the games I turned down, it's because they're under, you know, lowballing me. But a big part of that is there's sometimes like, hey, you know what? My audience is not the right audience for your product. Or hey, like, you know, I'm not comfortable advertising your product on my channel, or, again, I wouldn't tell them their product's crap, but I have had some games that come across that they're like, again, they usually lowball you, because usually the games that are like really crap quality, it's because they're cheaping out on everything start to finish, which includes their marketing, which is me. So I haven't had too many, but I've had one or two that I'm like, no, like, your game just doesn't seem like a good fit for my channel. It's usually something along those that I'll give them. It's like, no, I don't think your game's a good fit for my channel. I don't think you're going to get what you want out of it. And I don't think, like, if my audience is going to resonate with it as well. But it is a thing that, you know, I'm not schlepping anything that's willing to throw money at me. Yeah, exactly. Reputations are hard to build and easy to destroy. Yep, it takes a long time to un-effing a reputation. So again, you know, you engender a certain level of authenticity, a certain level of trust as a creator, you know, hopefully. But at the same time, in doing so, that means not, like, again, the classic, you know, get your bag or whatever, but, like, make sure when you're doing it, you're doing something on the up and up. Because like I said, there's only been like 2 sponsorships on the channel that I was like, this wasn't a win. And it was one that was like, it wasn't anything wrong with the game, like it wasn't a bad game per se. it just kind of was a miss. That, like, I thought it would do better with the channel, and that was, you know, way earlier on. And, like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of like, this is a little bit of a dud game. It wasn't a good fit for the audience. So, you know, both the viewers weren't getting kind of what they were interested and wanted, and then plus that mismatch there also meant the sponsor wasn't really getting what they wanted. They still got some data and all that, but it wasn't a good deal for anyone involved. And then there was another one, which the game was probably fine, but there was a communication mistake on their part, which I won't say the name. People will remember it, and if you remember the name, let's not crap talk them. Because that probably wasted a bunch of money on their part, because it was a good sponsorship for us and everything. But there was like this racing stunt game kind of thing, which is a little bit of an outlier for the channel, but like, you know what? I, like, every once in a while I'll play things that's well outside the norm on the channel, just kind of feel things out, because there's categories I don't expect to do well on the channel. Like War Tales, that's a turn-based tactical. Turn-based tactical, I played like 1 or 2 on the early days, and they did terribly on the channel. But I circled back, and we had, like, you know, later on 1 or 2 that did reasonably well. Oh, so it's not even that the online play wasn't working. That's the catch. Is they sent me when to play, and they didn't bother to include the time zone. And I turned around and I said, hey, you want me to play this at a certain time, so I am playing with other people, because it was like an online stunt racing whatever game. What time zone do you want me to play in? And they didn't get back. And at that point, I already had a contract and everything there that they were going to give me the time and all that. And I was like, all right, well, they told me at this time and didn't provide me a time zone. I can only guess if they didn't specify it, it's local time, because I can't guess what time they really want it. So I played with my local time zone, and we did run into one other person. But yeah, no, we couldn't get a match. I think we got into like one match and the person quit because they couldn't figure out their controls or whatever was going on their end. So yeah, we spent the whole like 2-hour sponsored segment, and didn't get a single race in because it was just not the right time and all that, and there was a bit of bugs because it was like an early preview. And I was like, it's a really shame for them, but it was just kind of one of those things. The good news for it was, luckily, it wasn't just like Need for Speed where you're just sitting in a lobby with your names with nothing to do. They had like a practice track and a whole bunch of stuff in their lobby. So we were doing all these stunts, exploring the world and all that. So we managed to keep it fun and interesting. But it definitely was not what they were aiming for. But it's like, look, man, I'm already putting in my time. I don't know what to tell you. Like, you know, by the time we realized the issue, it was like, all right, well, we're already well in this. Like, you just failed on your communication. Like, time zones matter, man. The world is not you individually. Did you give them a second chance without charging them? No. I already put in my hours. Like, if it was something like I had not asked several days in advance for the information, if I hadn't already asked at that point, then sure, like, that's on me. But I had asked them well in advance that they could have responded, and they just didn't respond. So I'm like, hey, man, because if I didn't play it, it would have been breach of contract that I didn't do what I say. Now, granted, I wouldn't get fined or anything. That'd just nullify the contract. I wouldn't get paid. They wouldn't do anything. That's whatever. You know, no blood, no foul. But, you know, by the contract, I had to stream at whatever time of day it was. And then plus, in addition, it was a temporary thing that's only like 2 days long. Or even, it may be less than that. It was like in a very narrow window that I was supposed to stream it. So even if it would have been delayed to like do it later, I would have just missed out and not gotten paid either. So the way I looked at it is like, hey, I did what I could on my side to, you know, make sure it was right by them. But unfortunately, they kind of dropped the ball. And to their credit, they like, you know, all things considered, they actually responded relatively positively. Like, hey, you know what? People had fun watching it. People seem to be enjoying it. So, like, it was our failure. Like, you did the best you could with what was there. Because I do think people had fun. I don't think they got any sales, but that same game, I don't think it even came out for like a year or two later, and I don't know what happened to it. It seemed like it might have been like dev hell or something like that. I never did catch back up on whatever happened to it. Because it seemed like they would do a playtest like once every 6 months or whatever, but I didn't really see where the game went. So I really don't know. I actually don't remember the name of the game off the top of my head either. It's fine. We don't need the name of the game. Because again, I don't want to disparage on them. Because that's an understandable mistake too, that you're caught up in all the details, like, cool, we're doing this at 7 o'clock p.m. Alright, so 7 p.m. we need you to cover this. Completely forgetting that you're talking among your team there who are all in the same place and I'm not there. People forget time zones a lot. Like, a lot. There's a lot of times you gotta circle back and go, hey, you have this embargo for this time on this day. I'm intending on playing on that time. Is this, like, what time zone is this? To make sure I'm not breaking embargo. Because that is another thing we have as content creators, is when they give us a key and all that, they'll be like, okay, here's the embargo. You're not allowed to you're not allowed to publish content or stream this until, this date, this time. Because they'll give the keys ahead of time so that, YouTube content creators can make their videos and all that kind of stuff. The press can write their news articles or whatever. So we'll get the games a little bit in advance and not be able to, not be able to do stuff with it until a certain point. And a lot of times, there's a lot of embargoes I've gotten that are missing their timestamps. A lot of times it doesn't matter. They'll be like, okay, the 23rd at 5 p.m. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not streaming on that day, so we'll just do it the next day, which means it doesn't matter what time zone it is. With that said, though, chat, it is getting to be about time. I need to be wrapping up because I gotta wake up really early and do a bunch of backbreaking labor. Maybe not. Gonna be doing a bunch of work to help out with some things that I don't want to really go into because it's not fun kind of stuff. Like, it's nothing in itself not fun. It's just, it's happening because of not fun reasons. Which I don't need to go into. It's on the Discord, all that stuff. But so it's very, very, very unlikely there will be a stream tomorrow. It's not a 0% chance, but I would anticipate that I will be over there to well past stream start and probably get back here late enough that it probably wouldn't make sense to start a stream that late. So with that said, there will be a stream on Sunday, so not tomorrow, but next day. We'll have a stream. I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to figure out when to get there. But thank you again so much for tuning in. If you're over on the YouTube side, the stream will be ending abruptly because I do not have a host ready over there, but thank you for tuning in. And for those over here on the Twitch side, if you have enjoyed tonight's content, you're not already following the channel, don't forget to drop a follow. That way you can find your way back here in the future. But